Gitsham joining us right now, the News Nation political contributor, former Republican candidate for Congress from California, and so is Nayak, who's the president of the Center for American Progress Action Fund. Now, I told you about that speech, but that's probably the first you've heard of it because nobody, literally, so sorry to say, Mr. President, was really talking about it today. Now, that said, it's a busy day in the news, but I don't know. Navin, what would you say about that? We have, this is, I guess, how it goes sometimes in a lame duck presidency, but this is a really unique one in many ways with an old president coming back. But how do you feel about it as I'm sure someone who supported President Biden, that it's, people just not talking about it as much anymore?
Yeah, no, to be honest, Connell, I think that's sort of been one of the challenges for a while, is that the president has struggled to sort of make news and to get attention, certainly around the economic investments he's made. I am really glad that he went and did this. He has an incredible legacy, and it's not just his. The vast majority of those investments were something that kind of all Democrats in Congress supported. They remain wildly popular, except that most Americans don't know about them. So I think there's a lot more work to do to continue to communicate. It obviously won't have any political benefit in the past election cycle, but I think this is sort of also the season we're in, where President Trump and the President Trump-elect is making a lot of the news right now.
No, of course, but that does, on the merits, on the actual issues, Denise, does bring up a wider conversation. I think it's a pretty good conversation to have, right? The Biden economic legacy. The Biden supporters would tell you that, as Navin just articulated, that there's a lot to be proud of. If you look at just numbers, just pure numbers from like economists, so they'll say we have the best economy in the world compared to the rest. So they say, all right, here comes Trump. He's inheriting a strong economy. It's because of Biden. But then you think about the election, and the economy was one of the reasons Trump won, right? So what would you say?
I think that trying to relitigate Biden's legacy on the economy is a losing argument for Democrats. And if they didn't learn that in the election, that's great for people like me, Republicans who want to see Republicans stay in office. Look, if I were a Democrat, I would be so excited that Biden is actually no longer in the headlines, right? They kicked him out, and there's a reason for it. And Americans really felt like this middle-up, bottom-up message that he's given was more of a middle finger to Americans who suffered under record inflation with 19% price increases. So you can talk about the economy and all of the theory, all that you want, but let's talk about politics. Let's talk about what people feel like. And I think that continuing to gaslight Americans after the campaign's over is just really obnoxious, honestly.
Well, I said this during the campaign. I think, to me, inflation as an economic issue is a different issue than the other ones, and that's what it is. And
one thing I'll say quickly, though, I hope that Republicans aren't taking credit for these investments next year.
Trump will be, no matter what. If the economy is good,
Trump will be at all those. Groundbreaking.
He will.
Like
there's literally no doubt. No matter what it is, the Dow could be up 10 points, and he will take credit for it. We know that going in. But I was going to say, I think inflation's a different issue, and that's what it is. And Denise is right about that. People feel it, Navin, differently. So you can talk, and that's what we ran into. Because I've covered business news and financial news for years, so you get caught in the stock market, or you talk about the job report, or whatever it may be. But inflation's different, and most adults in this, unless they're, especially middle-aged kind of adults, people in the 30s, 40s, 50s, really hadn't felt it like this in their adult life, and it's a political price was paid.
Yeah, and there's no question. Listen, Connell, that was a global problem. There wasn't a developed country in the world.
Right, but nobody wants to compare yourself. You don't want to compare yourself to another country, right? That was the issue. So, and that's what hurt Democrats. Again, it's like.
But I think the thing that we probably fail in retrospect is that Joe Biden did really put forward a very different theory here, which is you bet on the American people. That the investments he made was about investing in the American people, about betting that we could make things here. I think you're going to see Trump and MAGA put forward a very different economic theory, which is you bet on billionaires. You put billionaires in your cabinet, you give billionaires tax cuts, and I think it's going to backfire. I think that their economic theory is one that is still very unpopular, even though there's no question that inflation was huge headwinds for Democrats and Biden and Vice President Harris this year.
All right, let's put that aside for a moment. We have years to talk about it. The other issue, obviously, was immigration in the election, and that came up today. There was a hearing on Capitol Hill and they got into deportations and the plans the incoming Trump administration has for these mass deportations. Democratic Senator Dick Durbin talking about the Trump promises as empty promises. Let's play that clip and then talk about the plan overall. Senator Durbin.
The notion of Mexico building a wall on our southern border was repeated over and over again. It didn't happen. There was an extension of the wall on our border, but Mexico didn't pay for it. Things change when you go from high-flying campaign rhetoric to ground.
So that's interesting, Denise, because that, to the extent that Trump was able to talk about it as a candidate, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to deport these people, I'm going to do. Now he'll have to be a president who executes the actual plan and will be judged on that. What do you actually expect in the opening months of the Trump administration on this issue?
I expect him to follow through on his campaign promises to the extent that he's able to. I mean, he is facing headwinds by an entrenched Washington establishment that exists on both sides of the aisle, and that's what you saw Americans rail against in this campaign, was they're tired of politics as usual. And if Democrats haven't heard that message, Republicans certainly have. And that's going to continue to be an issue. I mean, when you watch the sort of graph of how trust in government has precipitously dropped since they were at their heights in the 60s. They've been at around 20% ever since the last years of George W. Bush's administration when I served him. And that's remained true regardless of who's in office. And so any effort that Trump or anyone else makes to stop just doing politics and government as usual and actually stand for the things that Americans believe in, they're going to get credit for because they're willing to disrupt the status quo. And that is exactly what this election was about.
Got to leave it there for today. We'll have you both back soon. Navin and Denise, thank you.